Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 164. No, even though you had to do it, this is too much. No. What does all this mean? Wei Lip-san, the leader of the Hua Sect, looked forward with a bewildered voice. Suddenly, there was a flood of foreign fighters, unlike anything he'd seen, pouring into Nanyang as Mount Hua's disciples ran out. In such a place, he couldn't wait on their return, especially with his position as sect leader. Wei Lip-san, who didn't know the situation, hurriedly led his disciples to the location where the warriors were gathered. When they finally traversed the mountain path and arrived at the sword tomb, they were met with the sight of many angry people. It's no use coming here now. The Wudang and the others already entered and blocked the entrance. Blocked the entrance? That bastard child went down and broke the entrance. I've never seen such a sick son of a bitch in my life. Sadly, the moment Wei Lip-san heard the words bastard and sick, he could guess who the last person that entered the place was. Before he could fully grasp the situation, the mountain began to vibrate and quake. What is this? It's collapsing. Get out of here right now. Now! Oh my God! What is happening? Those who couldn't give up their lingering regrets and remained at the sword tomb's entrance, as well as those who planned to loot the ones that entered before, were thrown into confusion. Everyone hurriedly retreated in panic. And rumble. A roar, as if the sky would collapse. The whole ground around the entrance began to sink. Oh, my... Those who couldn't give up their lingering regrets and remained at the sword tomb's entrance, as well as those who planned to loot the ones that entered before, were thrown into confusion. Then, what would have happened to those people below? They wouldn't survive. Even if they were martial artists, a human is only human. There are things that humans cannot handle. No matter how powerful or famous the ones that descended were, they were still men with flesh and blood. I can't believe it's all crumbling. Then, what about the divine weapons? Divine weapons, my ass. It's all over. Those who went inside are going to meet a pitiful end. As the realization that the divine weapons were lost settled in, many experienced a complex mix of disappointment as well as relief upon knowing that others wouldn't be able to get the weapons for themselves either. However, Wei Lip-san felt neither. No! He looked at the sword tomb with wide tearing eyes and collapsed on the ground. No way! This couldn't be the case. They shouldn't die in that tomb. No, I'm just starting to see the future of Mount Hua. Of course, Mount Hua had many disciples aside from the ones that came here. But Wei Lip-san knew. He knew that even if Mount Hua was a place that gave birth to many talented people, no one could substitute the ones that came here, especially Mount Hua's divine dragon. No one could replace Cheongmyeong because such a person could not be raised. How can this be? Wei Lip-san felt immense regret that he hadn't been able to stop them. No matter how many disciples came down from Mount Hua, Wei Lip-san knew that his position dictated that he followed orders. But he had overlooked the fact that they had little experience in the real world. I should have told them it was dangerous. Of course, there was no guarantee that they would stop even if he had told them, but at least he wouldn't hold as much regret. Wei Lip-san's eyes blurred as he thought of Cheongmyeong and spoke. Hey, Mount Hua's divine dragon. Didn't you say the time for the Hua Sect is starting? He had spoken as if he would carry the future of Mount Hua and the Hua Sect on his own shoulders. Father! Wei Lip-san didn't even wipe his tears and looked at Wei So-heng. I don't know if it's alright to say this now, but the probability of surviving there. Wei Lip-san shook his head with a wretched and sad face. They are only human. But we never know if we dig it up now. So-heng. Wei Lip-san let out a deep sigh. There was no stopping sadness. It was alright to mourn, but reality needed to be accepted. I understand how you feel, but stop and settle your mind. But Wei Soheng looked at the broken entrance of the sword tomb with regret. Of course, he also understood. There was no way the people inside could have survived. However, thinking about the disciples of Mount Hua who had traveled with him until now, he couldn't just turn a blind eye. Even if the heavens ignore them, Wei Soheng covered his eyes and sobbed. My God, they're all dead. That's more like it. If we can't get anything, then it's better if no one gets it. It's crazy that the Wudang and other sects people all died down there. It was bound to happen. Hearing the reactions of those behind him, Wei Soheng's face quickly contorted in anger. You... Leave it alone. But father, they are too arrogant. This is how Gangho is. Wei Lipsan had a bitter expression. Gangho is ruthless. Thousands of people rejoice the misfortune of others and slander them. Even here, there are people who are prepared to steal from and harm those who successfully emerged with divine weapons. No one would pray for the dead. If anyone had managed to escape the tomb with the divine weapons, another battle would have started here. No one here would have accepted the one that found the treasure as its rightful owner. Even if they managed to return home with the divine weapons, it would have thrown Gangho into a frenzy. It might be better that Nanyang experienced this tragedy if it meant that there was no new bloodbath in Gangho. But Wei Soheng couldn't stand it. Aren't you going too far? For a moment, everyone turned their eyes to him. People have died, and all you can do is crack jokes. Isn't this what a sore loser would say? What's with that bastard? Who knows? Must be a young kid who doesn't know the world. Be careful, brat, or you might die. Right when Wei Soheng was overflowing with emotions, Wei Lipsan sighed as he stepped forward and stood in front of his son. I am Wei Lipsan, the sect leader of Nanyang's Hua Sect. Hua Sect? Was there a place like that? Wei Lipsan ignored the reaction and spoke. Those who have nothing to gain here, please head home. The residents of Nanyang are anxious with so many powerful people flocking to this place. Who are you to tell us what to do? Especially with that little title of sect leader. Who's ever even heard of that sect? Wei Lipsan had spoken politely, but all that came back were insults. Wei Lipsan's face was distorted. He tried to be patient. Judging from the outside, Wei Lipsan seemed to have better control of his emotions compared to Wei Soheng. Finally, however, his anger erupted. I told you not to insult the dead and get the hell out of here. I'm already holding back my desire to tear apart your rotten mouths. Huh? Is he crazy? Someone he knows must have died inside. Wei Lipsan grabbed the sword on his waist. The least he could do was stop these men from insulting the dead in the sword tomb. That would be the greatest tribute he could offer the disciples of Mount Hua. But then, as he was about to yell, poke, poke, Wei Soheng poked his father in the back. Don't stop me. I've been patient enough. I cannot stand the words and actions of those impudent men any longer. Father, that's not it. There, look over there. Huh? Wei Lipsan turned his head and glanced where his son was pointing. What? Wei Soheng pointed to the middle of the broken entrance. What is that? It was then. Thud. Huh? Wei Lipsan's eyes widened in disbelief. Am I seeing it wrong? He must have been too excited about what was happening. Thud. Ah! Wei Lipsan's eyes grew as bright as a candle. This time, he knew that he wasn't wrong. Something was thudding and moving. Don't tell me. Just as he was about to jump down, woof, something pierced the floor with a dull sound. It didn't take long to realize that it was actually a human hand. Wiggle. The arm that had risen through the floor began to grope around and move slowly. And finally, the land and soil sprang up in all directions as someone's upper body popped up from below. Ugh, I almost died! It was a familiar voice, and he had a familiar face. It was a terribly familiar, irritating tone of voice. Chongmyung, young Taoist! Wei Lipsan jumped to the ground without delay, tears brimming around his eyes as he ran to Chongmyung. Chongmyung, who he believed had died, somehow survived and eventually escaped the sword tomb. Yaksun, that fucking dog! My sect leader Sahyung beat the shit out of that bastard for me! Wei Lipsan couldn't tell who he was talking to, but Chongmyung was pointing at the sky and cursing someone. And then another person's voice came from inside the hole. Move! Move, you bastard! Moving, I'm moving! Chongmyung crawled out with an annoyed expression, and then one after another, the disciples of Mount Hua crawled out. I was this close to death. If I ever attempt to enter a cave or hole again, then I haven't learned my lesson. As soon as Mount Hua's disciples emerged like beggars, they collapsed to the ground and flopped down. It was a sight that easily conveyed how hard it was for them to get out of there. Unable to control his emotions, Wei Lipsan rushed to the disciples of Mount Hua and hugged them. The disciples of Mount Hua were bewildered by his actions and looked at the man that hugged them. Oh? What is wrong with this mister? Sect leader. Wei Lipsan spoke in a trembling voice. I am glad. I'm really glad. Everyone is really back. Chongmyung and Baekchun scratched their heads with awkward expressions. Well, it was nice to have someone who welcomed them back. Mount Hua's divine dragon. Me, pull me out. My leg is stuck. That beggar, seriously. Chongmyung gritted his teeth and pulled up the struggling Hongdae-gwang. Along with him, the Beggar Union disciples were hanging on to Hongdae-gwang as they all began to pop out like sweet potatoes being pulled up on a farm. Come out separately. It's so heavy. Chongmyung was annoyed, but Hongdae-gwang didn't have the energy to respond and just laid down after he was pulled out. Seriously, I thought I was going to die. For real. Starting with Mount Hua and the Beggars Union, those who survived began to come out one after another. After everyone else emerged, the Wudang came up last. Hall Sanja looked up at the sky with a slightly subtle expression. I never thought I'd get to see the sun again. He really thought he was going to die. If Chongmyung hadn't shown his wits at the end of the crisis, they really would have been dead. It was such a dire situation. But the crisis wasn't over yet. When he saw the people who hadn't entered the sword tomb begin to encircle the survivors, Hall Sanja frowned with a ferocious spirit rousing within him. And no, those bastards. Having been pushed to the limit, his irritation was boiling over and about to explode as Chongmyung's eyes began to change.